She thought she knew exactly who she was falling for, until one devastating secret changed everything. The man she loved wasn't just powerful, he was the ruthless Mafia Boss everyone feared. As betrayal, revenge, and impossible sacrifices tear their world apart, one question remains: how far would you go to protect the only person you can't live without? You are listening to a story exclusively narrated on the Dark Romance Stories channel. Relax and step into the world of love stories filled with mystery, emotions, and passion. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment to support us. This content is the property of Dark Romance Stories. Please do not copy or re-upload it in any form. The rain fell over East New York like it had a grudge against the city, drumming on the roof of the black Maybach with a violence that matched the man in the back seat. Dante Ricci did not flinch at the sound. He rarely flinched at anything. At 34, he had learned that the world offered two kinds of noise, the kind that meant nothing and the kind that meant a man was about to die. Rain was the first kind. He watched the wet neon smear across the window, red and gold bleeding into the black glass, and he thought about how much he hated Tuesdays. His father had been buried on a Tuesday, his mother had stopped speaking on a Tuesday, and now, on a Tuesday, he was returning from a meeting that had gone exactly as badly as his instincts had warned. "You're quiet, boss," said Marco from the driver's seat. Marco had been with him 9 years, long enough to read the silences. "I'm thinking. About the Moretti thing. About everything." Dante rolled the crystal tumbler between his fingers, the whiskey untouched. He didn't drink when he worked, and tonight he was always working. Vincent looked at me, like a man who already knew how the story ends. Marco's eyes flicked to the mirror. "Your brother looks at everyone that way." That was true. Vincent Ricci had been born with a face that judged. But tonight there had been something else in it, something patient and cold, the look of a man who had planted a seed and was waiting for the harvest. Dante had felt it in the marrow of his spine, the old animal warning that had kept him alive since he was 12 years old, since the day he had watched his father's skull open like a struck melon on the marble steps of the Ricci estate. He was still thinking about that look when the world exploded. The first bullet took out the rear windshield. The second and third stitched across the door pillar, and the fourth found the narrow gap between armor plates, punched through the lever, through the muscle of his back, and buried itself in his left lung. The sound Dante made was not a scream. It was a wet, surprised exhalation, the sound of a man whose body had been opened to the rain. "Boss!" Marco was already flooring it, the Maybach's engine roaring as the tyres clawed for grip on the flooded asphalt. Muzzle flashes bloomed in the dark behind them, orange flowers in the black. Marco drove like a demon, weaving between the pylons of the elevated train, but the car was fighting him now, the electronics dying, warning lights cascading across the dash. Dante pressed his hand to his chest and felt the heat there, the impossible heat, and then the cold that followed it. He had seen men shot in the lung. He knew what the sound of his own breathing meant, that thin, whistling suck, like wind through a broken door. He was drowning, slowly, from the inside. "Hospital," he managed, blood on his teeth. "Nearest." Bronx General, 3 minutes. Hold on, boss. Hold on. 3 minutes. Dante had killed men in less time than that. He had built and burned empires in the space between heartbeats. But now, with his own heart stuttering, 3 minutes felt like the length of a life. He thought, absurdly, of the sea, of Sicily, of the house his grandmother had kept above the water, the white walls and the blue that went on forever. He had not thought of that place in 20 years. The Maybach fish-tailed onto the ramp toward the hospital, Marco fighting the wheel, and then the steering simply stopped answering. A bullet had found something vital in the car's spine. The heavy sedan skated across the rain-slick lot, clipped a parked ambulance, and slammed rear first into the steel gate of the hospital's ambulance bay with a sound like the end of the world. Silence after. The tick of a dying engine, the hiss of rain on hot metal, and somewhere far away, a voice. "Marco," Dante whispered. But Marco did not answer. Marco's head was against the wheel, and there was too much red for anything else to matter. Dante Ricci, who had never in his life asked anyone for help, lifted his ruined hand to the shattered window and pushed. Inside Bronx General, Dr. Elena Voss was 40 minutes into a double shift and running entirely on burnt coffee and spite. It was 2:47 in the morning, the dead hour when the drunks had gone home and the true emergencies had not yet begun, and she had allowed herself the luxury of sitting down. She was reading a journal article on thoracic reconstruction and eating a granola bar that tasted like drywall when the crash came. She was on her feet before she consciously decided to move. 10 years of trauma medicine had rewired her nervous system. The sound of catastrophe was a starting pistol. "Nadia," she called to the night nurse. "That was in the bay. Get me a gurney." The sliding doors were already jammed with rain and cold air as she ran out into the lot in her scrubs, her blonde hair plastered to her skull within seconds. The black car was crumpled against the gate like a beaten animal. She saw the driver first and knew, with the flat certainty of experience, that there was nothing to be done for him. But the back door was open, and a man had fallen half out of it into the flooded pavement, and that man was still breathing. Barely. Elena dropped to her knees in the water beside him. He was big, dark-haired, dressed in a suit that had cost more than she made in a month, and he was bleeding from a hole in his back that made the small, wet sound she had learned to fear. Tension pneumothorax. His lung was collapsing, the air and blood crushing his heart into the wrong side of his chest. "Sir, can you hear me? I'm a doctor." She pressed 2 fingers to his throat and found the pulse, fast, thready, wrong. His eyes opened. They were the darkest eyes she had ever seen. Black, almost to the iris. And even now, even drowning, they held something that made her breath catch. Not fear. Assessment. He was looking at her the way a wolf looks at a thing it has not decided whether to trust. "Not here," he rasped. "You don't get to make choices right now," she said, and there was no cruelty in it, only fact. "Nadia, chest decompression kit, needle, 14 gauge, and get him inside. Move! Move!" The gurney arrived. 3 of them heaved him onto it, and Elena climbed halfway on with him, straddling the rail, already cutting his shirt open with the trauma shears as they ran. The fine Italian fabric peeled away, and there, over the left side of his chest, she saw it. A tattoo, dark and intricate, an eagle grasping a laurel with a Latin motto beneath. She did not know then what it meant. She only knew that when her shears touched near it, his hand shot up with astonishing speed and closed around her wrist, hard enough to bruise. "Don't," he said. Blood bubbled on his lips. "I'm saving your life," Elena said, and pried his fingers loose with a strength that surprised him. "You can be angry about it later." She slid the needle between his ribs. There was a hiss, the sweet, terrible sound of pressure releasing, and the man's chest heaved as air rushed where it belonged. His black eyes rolled back, and for a moment she thought she had lost him. Then he breathed, ragged, whistling, alive. Elena did not know she had just saved the most dangerous man in New York. She only knew that as they burst through the trauma doors into the white light, his hand had found hers again, not to stop her this time, but to hold on, and that she had not pulled away. The operating room was cold, the way Elena liked it, cold enough that her hands stayed steady and her mind stayed sharp. The man on her table had lost nearly 2 liters of blood by the time she opened his chest, and the bullet had done what bullets do, torn through the lower lobe of the left lung, nicked a vessel that wanted very badly to kill him, lodged finally against a rib where it had spent the last of its fury. "BP's dropping," said the anesthesiologist, a tired man named Okafor, who had been dragged from the on-call room. 70 over 40. "Then give me pressers and stop telling me things I can see," Elena said, not unkindly. Her hands were inside the man's chest, packing, clamping, coaxing the torn vessel closed with the patience of a woman defusing a bomb. "Suction. There, hold it there." She worked. The clock on the wall gave up meaning. There was only the wound and the next stitch and the next. Somewhere outside the room, she was dimly aware, there was commotion. Men in dark clothes had appeared in the waiting area, quiet men who spoke to no one and watched everything. And hospital security had had a tense conversation with them that had ended, oddly, with security backing away. Elena filed this away. She did not have room for it now. She had room only for the lung, which she resected, and the vessel, which she repaired, and the heart, which twice tried to stop, and twice she brought back, once with drugs, once with her own hand pressed flat against it, feeling the fibrillation shiver into rhythm under her palm, like a bird calming in a cage. "Come on," she murmured to it. "Not tonight. You didn't come all this way to quit on me." The heart, as if it had heard her, resumed its beat. It was nearly 6 in the morning when she finally closed him. Grey light was leaking around the edges of the world when she peeled off her gloves, her back screaming, her hands finally allowed to shake. She had done impossible things before. She was one of the best trauma surgeons on the East Coast, which was precisely why she had chosen to bury herself in a public hospital in the Bronx instead of some gleaming private tower. Because here, the people who came through her doors had nowhere else to go, and that meant her hands mattered. This man, though, this man had had somewhere else to go, and had chosen not to, or had had the choice made for him. She found Okafor in the scrub room. "Who is he?" Okafor did not look at her. "You don't want to know." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one that keeps you healthy." He dried his hands with great care. "The men outside. You saw them?" "I saw them." "They're not family, not the crying kind. They're the other kind." Now he did look at her, and his eyes were frightened. "Elena." You did your job. Now forget his face, sign him off to me, and go home and forget you ever cut him open." Elena had never forgotten a patient's face in her life. It was, she sometimes thought, her only genuine flaw as a doctor. She carried them all, the saved and the lost, a gallery in her skull that never dimmed. She was not going to start forgetting now, and something stubborn in her chest, the same something that had made her fearless since she was a girl, watching her father, the pastor, face down a mob outside their Milwaukee church, refused to be told what to be afraid of. "I'll write my own notes," she said, and walked past him. Dante swam up out of the dark in pieces. First the ceiling, white tiles, a water stain shaped like Corsica. Then the pain, which was enormous and specific, a great burning weight on the left side of his chest. Then the sounds, the beep of a monitor, the hush of a ventilator he was no longer on, and closer, the turn of a page. He turned his head. The effort cost him. A woman sat in the chair beside his bed, and she was reading his chart with a frown that suggested the chart had personally disappointed her. She was still in her scrubs, blue and blood-flecked, her blonde hair escaping its knot, dark circles under eyes that were an unusual pale grey, like the North Sea in winter. She was, he registered with the small, detached part of his mind that never stopped working, beautiful, in a way that had nothing to do with softness. There was a blade in her. And then his memory returned all at once, the way memory does, the rain, the bullets, Marco's silence, and the trauma shears cutting toward the eagle inked over his heart. She had seen it. The Ricci crest, the mark that every made man in his family carried, the mark that no outsider was ever permitted to see and live. It was not vanity. It was the oldest and most inviolable law of his world. A stranger who could identify the boss, who knew his face and his mark, was a loose thread. And loose threads were pulled. His grandfather had killed a tailor for measuring him too carefully. His father had killed a woman who had done far less than save his life. The woman looked up and found him watching her. She did not startle. She simply set the chart down. "You're awake," she said. "Good. You died twice on my table. I'd hate for you to make it a habit." Her voice was low and even, an educated American voice with something else underneath it, a faint German precision in the consonants. "I'm Dr. Voss. Do you know where you are?" "A hospital." His own voice was a ruin. "You operated on me." "For 6 hours. You're welcome, by the way." She stood, checked his IV with brisk competence, and as she leaned over him, he caught the scent of antiseptic and, beneath it, something warmer, human. "You have a chest tube, a resected lung lobe, and roughly 40 stitches. You are going to be very uncomfortable for a very long time. And you are going to live." She paused. "Which is more than I can say for the man who was driving your car. I'm sorry." Marco. Something in Dante's chest that had nothing to do with the bullet clenched hard. He looked at this woman who had held his heart in her hand, who had brought him back from the far side of death twice in a single night, and he knew with absolute clarity that by every law he had ever lived under, she was already dead. His men were outside. A word from him and it would be done, quiet and clean, a tragic complication in the recovery of a wealthy patient. He opened his mouth to give the word. "Get some rest," Elena said, turning for the door. "I'll be back to check on you in an hour. Try not to die again. It's very inconvenient for both of us." And Dante Ricci, for the first time in 22 years, did not give the word. By the time the sun had fully risen over the Bronx, 3 things had happened in Bronx General that would change the course of Elena Voss's life, though she was aware of only one of them. The one she knew about, her patient was stable, and she was exhausted, and she wanted to go home. The 2 she did not know about, first, that a man named Salvatore Greco, consigliere to the Ricci family, 70 years old, with a face like folded leather and eyes that missed nothing, had arrived at the hospital and quietly taken control of the entire 4th floor, moving the boss to a private room and posting men at every exit. And second, that in a black car in the parking structure, that same Salvatore had spent 40 minutes on the phone with Dante's second-in-command, discussing what was to be done about the doctor. "She has to go," said Tommaso over the phone. Tommaso was young and hard and believed in the old ways with the fervour of the recently promoted. "She saw the mark, Sal. You know the law." "I know the law better than you were alive to learn it," Salvatore said mildly. "The law also says we do not draw attention. You want to kill a surgeon in a public hospital, a woman who is on record as the last person to touch the boss? You want the FBI, the newspapers, We make it look like. There is no making it look like anything. She is famous, this doctor. Do you know she was on the television 2 years ago? The one who operated on the senator's daughter. You want to make that woman disappear?" Salvatore sighed, an old man's sigh. "No, we wait for Dante. He decides. That is the only law that matters." And Dante, when he was strong enough to speak, decided nothing that anyone expected. Salvatore came to him at noon, when the doctor had gone home to sleep and the room was quiet. He kissed Dante on both cheeks, with genuine feeling. He had known the boy since he was a boy, had carried him from his father's funeral when his legs would not work. "You gave us a fright, figlio." "Vincent," Dante said. It was not a question. Salvatore's face did not change, but something moved behind his eyes. "You are certain?" "He looked at me last night like a man reading the last page of a book. And the shooters knew the route. They knew the armor gaps. Only family knows the armor gaps." Dante closed his eyes. Saying it aloud made it real in a way that hurt worse than the wound. His brother. His blood. The boy he had taught to ride a bicycle in the courtyard of the estate. The only person left alive who remembered their father's laugh. "My own brother tried to have me killed." If this is true, it is true, and we will deal with it, but not yet, not until I can stand. Dante opened his eyes. For now, Vincent believes I might die. Let him believe it. A man who thinks he's won gets careless. Salvatore nodded slowly, the strategist in him approving. Then his face grew grave. "There is the other matter. The doctor." And there it was. The rule, old as the family itself, hanging in the antiseptic air between them. Dante was silent for a long moment. He thought of the grey eyes, the steady hands, the voice that had told him not to die because it was inconvenient. He thought of the fact that she had pried his fingers off her wrist and gone right on saving him, unafraid, a woman who did not know that the man on her table could have the world burned for her displeasure and would not have cared if she had. "No one touches her," he said. Salvatore blinked. "Dante, you heard me." "She saw the mark,"
She knows your face. The law is not a suggestion. It is the wall that keeps us all standing.
If it is known that an outsider saw the crest and lives, that the boss himself made the exception, then it will be known that the boss makes the law, and the law does not make the boss. Dante's voice was quiet and absolute, and Salvatore, who had heard that exact tone from Dante's father and his grandfather before him, fell silent. She stays alive, but you are right that she cannot simply walk away carrying what she carries. Then what? Dante looked at the water stain shaped like Corsica, and the idea came to him, fully formed, elegant, and terrible. The kind of solution he was famous for, the kind that gave everyone exactly enough of what they wanted to trap them completely. She becomes ours, he said. Ours. The family's physician, personal, private.
She is the best trauma surgeon in this city. Do you know how many of our men have died in the last 5 years because we could not take a gunshot to a hospital without questions? How many I have buried who a real doctor could have saved? His eyes glittered. We have lawyers on retainer, accountants. We do not have a doctor we own. Now we will. You cannot own a person, Dante. You can, if you make the cage comfortable enough that leaving becomes unthinkable. He almost smiled, and it was not a kind expression. She will be paid more than she could earn in 3 lifetimes. She will be protected. She will want for nothing, and she will not leave because she will not be permitted to. And because when she understands what we are, she will understand that leaving means she dies. It is the only way she survives what she saw. It is a gift. She simply won't see it that way at first. Salvatore studied him for a long moment. He had watched this boy become this man, had watched the grief calcify into something armoured and cold, and he had never, in all those years, seen Dante Ricci look at anything the way he had just looked when he spoke of the doctor. It worried him more than any FBI or any war. "You are the boss," Salvatore said at last. "But I have known you since you were in short pants. So I will say this once, and never again. Be careful. A man who breaks the oldest law for a woman is a man who has already lost the war he thinks he is winning." Dante did not answer. He was watching the door through which the doctor would return, and something in his ruined chest, some old dead thing, had begun very quietly to beat again. They came for Elena 3 days later, and they were exquisitely polite about it, which was somehow worse. She had been off for 2 days, sleeping and running along the East River and trying not to think about the man with the black eyes, when a car she did not recognize was waiting outside her walk-up in Astoria. A silver Bentley, absurd on her street of bodegas and Greek diners. A man got out, old, elegant, in a grey suit, with kind eyes that she immediately did not trust. "Dr. Voss, my name is Salvatore Greco. I represent the family of the man whose life you saved. He would like to thank you. Would you do me the honor of joining me for lunch?" "I'm not really dressed for lunch." "You are perfect," Salvatore said, with such courtly sincerity that she almost laughed. "Please, it is not far, and I promise you it is in your interest to come." The last sentence was delivered so gently that it took Elena a moment to recognize it for the threat it was.
She looked at the old man, and at the second man behind the wheel who had not turned around, and at her quiet street in the bright afternoon, and she understood that she was being given the courtesy of a choice that was not a choice at all. She thought of Okafor. Forget his face. She got in the car. They drove into Manhattan, to a restaurant that had no sign, where the maitre d' greeted Salvatore as Don and led them to a private room, walled in wine bottles. And there, seated at a small table, pale and thinner but upright, dressed in black with his arm in a discreet sling, was her patient. Elena stopped in the doorway.
"You should not be out of a hospital," she said, before anything else. "You had a lung resection 4 days ago." "And yet?" Dante rose, wincing, and she saw the discipline it cost him to hide the wince. "Dr. Voss, please, sit. I owe you a debt I intend to discuss." She sat, because standing accomplished nothing. Salvatore melted away. A waiter poured wine she did not touch. Up close and conscious, the man was even more disconcerting than he had been dying. There was a stillness to him, a total economy of movement, and those black eyes rested on her with an attention so complete it was like being under a lamp. "You know who I am," he said, not a question. "I know you have a great many frightening men and no medical insurance forms." She met his eyes. "And I know you have a tattoo that made a very nervous anesthesiologist tell me to forget your face. So I can guess." Something flickered in his expression. Approval, maybe, or hunger. "You are not afraid." "I've held a lot of dangerous things in my hands, Mr. Ricci. Dante Ricci." The name meant nothing specific to her, and everything general. Ricci. She had read it in the post, in the true crime paperbacks her ex used to leave around the apartment. A mafia name, an old one. "Well, Mr. Ricci," she said, and was proud that her voice did not shake. "Your heart is a very dangerous thing, and I held it too. So no, I'm not afraid. I'm tired, and I'd like to know why I'm here." Dante was quiet for a moment. Then he told her the truth, because he had decided that with this woman lies would be both useless and beneath the strange respect she had already earned. "You saw the mark on my chest," he said. "In my world, that mark is not permitted to be seen by anyone outside the family. The penalty for seeing it is not negotiable. It is death. It has been death for 100 years, without a single exception." The wine glasses caught the light. Elena did not move. "You are the first exception," Dante said. "You saved my life, twice, with your own hands, and I find I am not able to repay that by ending yours. So I am offering you something else. Something no one has ever been offered before." He leaned forward, and the movement pulled at his stitches, and he did not let it show. "Come and work for me. Be the family's physician. You will treat the wounds that cannot be taken to hospitals. You will be paid $2 million a year, in cash, tax-free. You will have an apartment, a car, protection, anything you require. You will save lives, which, I am told, is the thing you love. And in return, you will never speak of what you know, and you will not leave." The room was very quiet. "You're asking me to be a mob doctor," Elena said slowly. "I am asking you to be alive," Dante said. "The offer is generous, but do not mistake it for a request. There is no version of this conversation where you go home and forget me, Dr. Voss.
There is only the version where you thrive and the version where you do not survive the week. I would very much prefer the first. So, I think, would you."
She looked at him for a long time. She saw the trap for what it was, a velvet-lined cage, gold bars over a locked door. She saw that he had considered killing her and chosen not to, and that this made him neither kind nor safe, only interesting, only dangerous in a more complicated way. And she saw, underneath the cold recitation of the offer, something she recognized from her patients in the moments before they let her cut them open. A man handing over a piece of himself and daring her to break it. "You said no exceptions in 100 years," she said. "None. Then why me?" And Dante Ricci, master of every negotiation, feared by governors and killers alike, found that he did not have an answer he was willing to say aloud. So he said the only true thing he had. "Because you told me not to die," he said. "Because it was inconvenient. And no one has spoken to me like a human being in a very long time." Elena Voss picked up the wine she had refused and drank. They gave her a penthouse. It was on the Upper East Side, 40 floors above the park, with windows that ran from floor to ceiling, and a view that made the city look like a thing you could own. The furniture was new and expensive and impersonal, chosen by someone with taste and no soul. There was a wine fridge stocked with vintages she couldn't pronounce, a closet already full of clothes in exactly her size, and, in a locked cabinet in the second bedroom that they had converted into an examination room, more surgical equipment than most emergency departments could dream of. There was also, always, a man in the lobby who worked for Dante and not for the building. Elena stood at the window on her first night and understood the shape of her new life. She was rich now. She was safe now. She was a prisoner now. All three were true at once, and the trick, she suspected, would be never letting herself forget the third, no matter how comfortable the first two became. She had made one demand before she agreed, that she be allowed to keep working 2 shifts a week at Bronx General. She had expected refusal. Instead, Dante had considered it and said yes, with conditions. A driver, a guard, and the understanding that if she ever spoke to the wrong person, it would end. She had taken the deal. She would not give up the only work that made her feel like herself, the patients who came in with nothing and left her hands alive. It was, she told herself, a thread back to who she was. She did not yet understand that Dante had granted it because he had already calculated that the thread would tie her to her old life just tightly enough to make the new one bearable, and that a bearable cage was the only kind that held. Her first patient in her new role came on the 4th night. They brought him in through the service elevator at 2 a.m, a young man named Enzo, 22, with a knife wound in his abdomen that had been packed with a kitchen towel by someone who meant well and knew nothing. Behind him came Dante himself, still moving carefully, still healing, watching from the doorway of her examination room with his arms folded. Elena took one look at the boy and stopped being a prisoner and started being a surgeon. On the table, someone cut his shirt. Not you, you'll hurt him. Give me the shears. Enzo, look at me. You're going to be fine. I need you to breathe. What's his blood type? Does anyone know his blood type? O positive, Dante said quietly. You know his blood type? I know all of theirs. She did not have time to examine what that meant. She worked,
and it was ugly and bright and real, and 40 minutes later the boy was stitched and stable and weeping with relief on her exam table, gripping her hand and calling her an angel in Italian. Elena, who did not believe in angels, held his hand anyway. When it was done, and Enzo had been carried to a bed to recover, she found Dante still in the doorway. He had not moved. He had watched the entire thing with an intensity that should have been unnerving, and was, she admitted to herself, something else. "You're staring," she said, stripping off her gloves. "You saved his life. That's the job. You held his hand. That's also the job, the part they don't teach." She washed up at the small sink, aware of him behind her in the mirror. "You didn't have to stay." "No." "Then why did you?" Dante was quiet for a moment. "Because I have watched 100 men die of wounds like his," he said. "Boys I sent into danger. I carried each of them out and buried them and told myself there was nothing to be done. And tonight, there was something to be done. And you did it. And now his mother will not have to wear black on Sunday." He paused. "I wanted to see it. What it looks like when the story ends differently." Elena turned around. In the low light of the examination room, with the city glittering behind him and blood on the towels between them, Dante Ricci did not look like a monster. He looked like a man who had spent his whole life at funerals and had just, for the first time, attended a resurrection. "It ends differently every time you let me do my work," she said. "That's the deal you made, whether you knew it or not. You didn't just buy a doctor, you bought fewer funerals." Something changed in his face. It was subtle, a softening at the edges of that carved stillness, and it was gone almost before she saw it. But she saw it. "Get some rest, Dr. Voss," he said, and turned to go. "Elena," she said. He stopped. "If I'm going to be pulling bullets out of your family at 2 a.m, you can use my name. Mr. Ricci is what people call you before you have them killed. I'd rather not be in that category." For a moment she thought she had gone too far. Then Dante Ricci did something that his own consigliere would not have believed possible. He smiled. A real one, small and startled, that transformed his cold face into something almost young. "Elena," he said, testing it, and the way he said it made the name sound like something that belonged to him now. "Good night, Elena." He left. She stood a long time in the empty room, telling herself that the warmth in her chest was adrenaline, was exhaustion, was anything at all except the beginning of a mistake she was far too smart to make. She was wrong, and some part of her already knew it. The weeks that followed taught Elena the geography of her new world. She learned that the Ricci family was not the cartoon of grinning brutes she had half expected, but a corporation with an army, run by a man who thought 3 moves ahead of everyone in every room. She learned that Dante Ricci woke before dawn, read 4 newspapers in 2 languages, worked out, despite his healing lung, with a grim determination that frightened his physical therapist, and rarely slept more than 4 hours. She learned this because she saw him almost every day. She had not expected that. She had expected to be a resource, summoned when blood needed cleaning up. Instead, Dante found reasons. A twinge in his chest that needed checking, which was real. A question about a soldier's recovery, which was reasonable. A dinner to discuss the operation of the medical program, which was neither of those things, and both of them knew it. He took her to a restaurant on the 90th floor of a building she'd only ever seen from the street. He took her to an opera she pretended to be bored by and cried at. He took her once to a warehouse in Red Hook that had been converted into a nightclub the family owned, all black glass and gold light and beautiful people who parted before him like water, and she watched the entire room orient toward Dante Ricci the way plants orient toward the sun, and she understood for the first time the sheer scale of what he was. "Everyone here is afraid of you," she said, over a drink she hadn't ordered that had appeared perfectly made.
Yes. Doesn't that get lonely?
Dante looked at her across the small table, the gold light carving his face.
"You're the first person to ask me that. That's a yes."
"It's a yes." He turned his glass. "My father was loved. People wept in the streets when he died, real tears, not the kind you buy. I decided when I was 12 that love was a weakness that got you shot on your own front steps. Fear is more reliable. Fear does not require you to be worthy of it." He said it lightly, but she heard the 12-year-old underneath the words, the boy standing in his father's blood, learning the wrong lesson at the worst possible moment. "That's a terrible thing to teach a child," she said quietly. "No one taught it to me. I taught it to myself. It's kept me alive 22 years.
He looked at her. "Until a doctor decided I was inconvenient to lose."
The air between them changed. It had been changing for weeks, a slow gathering like weather. Elena was 31 years old and had loved twice in her life and been disappointed both times by men who wanted a softer version of her than the one that existed. This man wanted no softer version. This man watched her set bones and pull bullets and argue with him about the ethics of everything, and he looked at her afterward like she was the most extraordinary thing he had ever been permitted near. It was intoxicating. It was also, she reminded herself for the 100th time, a cage. And the man across the table was the warden, however beautifully he wore it. "I hate what you do," she said. "I want to be clear about that. I've spent my whole life on the other end of the violence men like you make. My father was a pastor. He ran a shelter, and once he stood between a gang and a boy who owed them money, and they put him in the hospital for it, and he forgave them from his bed. I couldn't forgive them. I decided I'd spend my life undoing what men with guns do, and now I work for one." Dante did not flinch. "And yet you took the job." "Because you would have killed me if I didn't. Don't dress it up." "I would have." He said it without apology, and somehow the honesty was better than any apology would have been. "But you could have run, gone to the FBI, taken your chances. You're too smart not to have considered it. Why didn't you?" Elena opened her mouth to say, "Because I'd be dead," and found that it was not the whole truth, and that he would know it wasn't.
"I don't know," she said instead, and it was the most dangerous thing she had said all night. Dante reached across the table. He did not touch her. His hand stopped a breath from hers on the black glass, close enough that she could feel the heat of it, and he left it there, an offer and a question, and he watched her face with those unbearable eyes. "I have never wanted anything I could not take," he said. "It's a new experience. I find I don't hate it. Dante," her voice was not steady now, "this is a mistake. Almost certainly. You own me. Whatever this is, it can't be. It isn't fair when you hold every card. I can't tell if I—"
She stopped. "It isn't fair." He withdrew his hand at once, and she was appalled by how much she missed the almost touch. "You're right," he said.
"So I'll make you a promise, and I do not make promises. Nothing happens that you do not choose. The offer of the job stands regardless. Your life, your safety, your work, none of it depends on this. I will not use the cage to open a door you want kept shut. If you want only to be my doctor until the day you die, that is what you will be, and I will never speak of this again." He stood and dropped bills on the table without looking at them. "But I will not pretend I don't want you, Elena. I've spent too long pretending not to want things. It's exhausting, and I'm tired. And you told me not to die." He walked her to the car in silence. And Elena Voss sat in the dark of the back seat as the cities slid by, and understood that the most dangerous thing about Dante Ricci was not his army, or his fear, or the law he could break for her. It was that he had just handed her the only key to the cage and told her the door was hers to open. The boy could not have been more than 8 years old. They brought him to her on a Thursday, wrapped in a coat too big for him, unconscious, with a bullet in his shoulder and a fever from the infection that had already set in. Elena did not ask questions at first. She never did, not with a child bleeding on her table. She cut the coat away, cleaned the wound, started the antibiotics, and worked with the particular ferocity she reserved for the young, because children were the one thing that could still make her hands want to shake. It was only when the boy was stable, sleeping under her lamp, that she noticed the men in her apartment had gone very quiet. "Who is he?" she asked Tommaso, who was standing by the door with an expression she had never seen on him. Not the usual arrogance, but something closer to dread. "He's nobody," Tommaso said. "Fix him and forget it." Tommaso. She had learned in her weeks here that these men respected exactly one thing more than Dante, and that was competence delivered without fear. "I have my hands inside a child. Do not lie to me about who he is. It changes how I treat him if there's family history, medications, anything. Who is he?" Tommaso looked at the door. Then he told her, because she was the doctor, and because he was more afraid of what would happen if the boy died than of what would happen if he talked. "His name is Matteo Moretti," he said. "He's the son of Angelo Moretti." The name meant nothing to Elena, but the way Tommaso said it, and the way the other men in the room stiffened, told her it meant everything. "And Angelo Moretti is?" "The head of the Moretti family. Brooklyn, the docks, half of Queens." Tommaso's jaw worked. "We've been at the edge of war with the Morettis for 2 years. Dante thinks Angelo may have been behind the shooting, the one you patched him up from. That boy on your table is the son of the man who might have tried to kill the boss." Elena looked at the child. He was 8 years old. He had long, dark lashes and a scattering of freckles, and a stuffed animal that had fallen out of his coat pocket, a threadbare rabbit that someone had clearly loved for him a very long time. His breathing was shallow but steadying under her care. He was, whatever his father was, a boy with a bullet in him, and Elena Voss had never in her life let the sins of a father touch a child on her table. But she understood now the dread in the room. Because if she saved this boy, if the Ricci family sheltered and healed the son of their enemy, it was not a mercy. In this world, it was a weapon, a hostage, a spark. And if the boy died in Ricci hands, it was a declaration of war that would put every man in this room, and Dante, in a coffin. "Where did you find him?" she asked. "Outside a school in Bensonhurst. There was a shooting. Someone hit the Moretti motorcade. We don't know who. Maybe an outside crew trying to start something. The men scattered. The boy was hit and left behind in the chaos. Enzo found him crawling in an alley. He brought him here because Tommaso spread his hands. Because you're here. Because you fix people. He didn't think. He just grabbed the kid." Enzo. The boy she'd saved on her 4th night. He had seen a wounded child and brought him to the one person he trusted to help, and in doing so, he had handed his family a live grenade. The door opened. Dante came in, and the room went silent in a different way. He looked at the boy on the table. He looked at Elena, and Elena watched the calculation happen behind his eyes with a speed that took her breath. She could see him running the moves the way a chess master sees a board, and she could see him arrive at the cold conclusion that any boss in his position would reach. "He can't be here," Dante said. "If Moretti finds his son in my house, it's war tomorrow."
If the boy talks when he wakes, he's seen faces, seen the apartment, it's a thread we can't leave loose. His voice was level, terrible in its reasonableness. "Wrap him up. We leave him somewhere his people will find him. If he lives, he lives. If the wound takes him on the way, that's God's business, not ours." "No," Elena said. The room froze. "He has an infection," she said, standing between Dante and the table without deciding to. "He's 8 years old, and he has an infection. And if you move him now, without the antibiotics finishing, without the wound draining, he dies. Not maybe, certainly. You'd be killing him. You'd be a man who ordered the death of a wounded child because it was politically convenient. And I will not let you be that man in my house. It isn't your house. It's my table." She did not raise her voice. She had learned that from him. "You gave me this job because I save lives. This is a life. You don't get to buy my hands and then tell them whose blood is worth saving. That's not a doctor. That's an executioner with a medical degree, and I won't do it. Kill me first if you have to. But that boy leaves this table alive and healed, or he doesn't leave it at all, and you'll have to explain to yourself why." Dante Ricci stared at her. No one spoke to him this way. No one had spoken to him this way since his father died. The men in the room were looking at the floor, at the walls, anywhere but at the impossible sight of a woman standing between the boss and his order and not backing down. And Dante, cold, ruthless, 3 moves ahead, found that he could not run the calculation anymore. Because every path that ended with the boy dead now also ended with the way Elena was looking at him right now, becoming the way she would look at him forever. And he discovered, standing in his own gilded cage, that this was the one outcome he was not willing to accept. "Save him," Dante said. The room exhaled. "Save him," he said again, quieter to himself, like a man surprised by his own voice. "And God help us all."
Matteo Moretti woke the next morning to find a strange blonde woman changing the dressing on his shoulder, and he did what any brave 8-year-old would do. He tried to bite her. "Ow, okay, that's fair," Elena said, jerking her hand back and laughing despite herself. "That's actually a very reasonable response to your situation. I'm Elena. I'm a doctor."
You got hurt, and I've been fixing you, that's all. Nobody here is going to hurt you.
She held up the threadbare rabbit. "Also, this fell out of your pocket. I put a stitch in his ear where he was coming apart. I hope that's okay. He was very brave about it." The boy stared at her and at the rabbit, and something in his small, terrified face cracked open. He took the rabbit and held it to his chest with his good arm, and began, silently, to cry. Elena had seen a great deal of pain in her life. This undid her more than most of it. A small boy in an enemy's house, wounded and alone, clutching a stitched rabbit and crying without a sound because he had already learned at 8 that crying loudly was dangerous. She sat down on the edge of the bed. Hey, you're safe. I promise."
I don't break promises. It's a whole thing with me. She very gently touched his hair. "You want to tell me about the rabbit?" "His name is Capitano," Matteo whispered. "My mama gave him to me before she went to heaven." And that was the end of any distance Elena might have kept. Dante found them an hour later, the boy asleep again, the rabbit under his chin, and Elena sitting beside him with an expression on her face that Dante had never seen there and could not name. He stood in the doorway a long time. "His mother is dead," Elena said, without turning around. "He watched me stitch a toy rabbit like it was surgery. He's 8. She finally looked at Dante, and her grey eyes were wet and furious. "This is what your world does. This is the harvest of the thing you and Angelo Moretti have been doing to each other for 2 years. An 8-year-old who knows how to cry silently." Dante did not defend himself. He had learned, with her, that defence was useless, and honesty was the only currency she accepted. "I know what my world does," he said. "I have known since I was his age." He came into the room and looked down at the sleeping boy, and something moved across his face, some recognition. "I was 12. He's 8. But I know exactly what he learned last night." They stood together over the child in silence. "You have to send him back," Elena said finally. "You know that. Not dumped in an alley, sent back, safe, healed, to his father. It's the only thing that doesn't end in more of this." She gestured at the boy. "More of them. If I send him back, I show weakness. I show my hand. I tell Angelo Moretti that the Ricci family had his son and his throat and did nothing." Dante's jaw was tight. "In my world, that is not mercy. It's an invitation. He'll read it as fear and press harder. Then let him read it wrong." Elena stood. "Dante, you've been playing this game your whole life, 3 moves ahead, and where has it gotten you? A brother who shot you, a war that never ends, a boy crying over a rabbit. What if the move nobody expects, the move that actually ends something, is the one where you just do the decent thing and let it cost you?" Dante looked at her for a long moment. It was, he thought, the most naive thing he had ever heard, and possibly the wisest. He made the arrangement himself. He did not delegate it. 3 nights later, healed enough to travel, Matteo Moretti was driven to a church in Bensonhurst, where his father worshipped, and handed over by Salvatore Greco personally, with a note in Dante's own hand. Angelo, your son came to us wounded. Our doctor healed him. We return him whole. Whatever is between us, it was never his. D. Elena did not go. She stood at the penthouse window and watched the car pull away with the boy in it. Capitano, the rabbit, pressed to the glass in a small, waving hand, and she wept in a way she had not let herself weep in years. Dante found her there. He did not touch her. He stood beside her at the window, close enough that their arms almost met, and they watched the tail lights disappear into the Manhattan dark. "You did a good thing," she said.
"I did a dangerous thing," he said. "There's a difference. I did it because you asked. I want you to understand that. I did not do it because it was right. I don't know how to do things because they're right anymore. I did it because you looked at me like I was worth being right, and I have wanted my entire life for someone to look at me like that and be correct." Elena turned to him. In the glass, 40 floors above the sleeping city, their reflections stood side by side, the surgeon and the criminal, the woman who healed and the man who ordered wounds. And for a moment, in the dark, the reflection did not look like a warden and his prisoner. It looked like two people who had each spent their whole lives standing over the wreckage of other people's violence, finally standing beside someone who understood.
"You're worth being right," she said. "That's the terrible thing, Dante. I've been trying for weeks to believe you're just a monster who bought me. It would be so much easier. And then you send a boy home with a rabbit and a note, and you tell me you did it wrong for the right reasons, and I can't." Her voice broke. "I can't keep the door shut. I keep trying, and you keep giving me reasons." He turned to her. He lifted his hand, and this time he did touch her. 2 fingers, gentle, brushing the tears from her cheek, a gesture so at odds with everything she knew about him that it stopped her breath. "Then open it," he said. "Not because you have to. There's no cage in this. I told you. Only if you choose." And Elena Voss, who had spent her whole life fighting the darkness men made, kissed the darkest man she had ever known in a window above the city and chose him. Somewhere across the water, a boy fell asleep holding a rabbit, safe in his father's house. And somewhere else, a man named Vincent Ricci received word that his brother was not only alive, but had gone soft. And he began to smile. Loving Dante Ricci was, Elena discovered, like loving a fire. It warmed her in ways she had not known she was cold. He was, in private, a different man than the one the world feared. Not soft, never soft, but attentive with a totality that unravelled her. He remembered everything she said. He learned her body like a language he intended to become fluent in. He lay awake in the dark after she slept and watched over her with a vigilance that should have frightened her and instead made her feel, for the first time in her adult life, like something too precious to lose. But a fire is still a fire, and Elena did not let herself forget it. She saw the other man too. She saw him take a phone call at 3 a.m. and return to bed with his eyes gone flat and dead. And she knew without asking that somewhere in the city a man had ceased to exist. She saw the way his soldiers flinched.
She saw once blood on his cuff that was not his own, and he had followed her gaze and not lied about it, and she had not asked, and they had both understood that this was the bargain, that she loved a man whose hands were stained, and that she would not pretend otherwise, and that the pretending otherwise was the one thing that would end them. "How do you do it?" she asked him one night. They were on the terrace, wrapped in the dark, the city burning gold below. "How do you order those things and then come back here and be this with me?" Dante was quiet for a long time. "I built a room," he said finally, "when I was 12. A room inside me where I put the things I have to do. I go in, I do them, I close the door. The man in that room is not the man who is with you. I keep them separate. It's the only way I've survived." He looked at her. "You're the first person I've ever wanted in the part of me that isn't in that room. It's why this is dangerous. You make me want to close the door and never open it again. And a room I never open again is a room where you die." Elena leaned into him. "I'm not going to die. Everyone I have ever loved has died," Dante said simply. "My father, my mother in her way, Marco in the front seat of that car. It's why I stopped. Love in my world is just a longer word for a target painted on someone's back." His arm tightened around her. "And now I've painted one on yours, and I can't take it back. And it's the most selfish thing I've ever done. And I would do it again." She should have been frightened by the possessiveness in it. Instead, she understood it, because she felt it too, the terrible, greedy tenderness of loving someone in a world designed to take them. The FBI came for her 3 days later. She was leaving Bronx General after a shift, walking to the car where her driver waited, when a woman fell into step beside her. 40s, plain suit, sensible shoes, a face designed to be forgotten. "Dr. Voss, don't stop walking. Don't look at me. My name is Special Agent Karen Reyes, FBI. We need to talk, and you need to look like we're not talking." Elena's blood went cold. Her driver was 30 feet away, watching. If he saw, if he reported... "I have nothing to say to you," she murmured, keeping her pace. "You have everything to say to me. Elena Voss, trauma surgeon, spotless record, and 8 weeks ago you fell off the map into the arms of Dante Ricci." Reyes's voice was calm and relentless. "We know what you are to him now. We've had eyes on that penthouse for a month. We know you treat his men. We know you were there the night the Moretti boy vanished and came home. You are, whether you meant to be or not, inside the most dangerous organization on the eastern seaboard. And we are going to give you a choice that only comes once." "I don't help us," Reyes said. "Wear a wire. Tell us what you see. Give us Dante Ricci and the whole structure under him, and we will make you disappear. New name, new life, protection, freedom. Or don't, and stay in that gilded box until the day it gets you killed, because it will, Elena. Women in your position always end up in the river. Always." She slowed. "We know he's holding you against your will. We know you didn't choose this. We're the only exit that doesn't end in a body bag. Think about it. There's a card in your left coat pocket. Yes, already. I'm good at my job. Call the number when you're ready to be free." And she was gone, folding into the crowd before Elena could say a word. Elena walked the rest of the way to the car on legs that did not feel like her own. She got in. She smiled at her driver.
She said something about being tired.
And the whole ride back to the golden cage, her hand was closed around the card in her pocket like it was a live coal. Freedom. The word she had told herself for 8 weeks she wanted above everything. A new name. A life where no one owned her. A life where she never again had to wonder whose blood was on the man she loved. Give us Dante Ricci. She sat in the penthouse that night and watched him come home, watched the flat, dead eyes soften the instant he saw her, watched the warden vanish and the man appear, watched him cross the room to her like she was the only fixed point in his burning world. And she understood the true shape of the trap she was in. It had never been the cage. The cage she could have survived, could have plotted against, could have hated cleanly. The trap was that she loved him. And the exit door the FBI had just handed her led straight through his grave. "You're far away tonight," Dante said, taking her face in his hands. "Where are you?" "I'm holding a card that could destroy you," she thought. "I'm being asked to choose between the freedom I swore I wanted and the man I swore I'd never let myself want. And I don't know what I'm going to do." "I'm here," she said, and kissed him so she wouldn't have to lie with words. That night, while he slept, she took the card into the bathroom and looked at it for a long time under the cold light. Special Agent K. Reyes, a phone number. The whole rest of her life printed on cardstock. She did not tear it up. That was the thing that frightened her most. A braver woman, a better woman, would have torn it up. Instead, she hid it inside the lining of a coat she never wore, because some cold and honest part of her was not yet willing to close that door either. And she lay back down beside the sleeping monster she loved and stared at the ceiling until dawn. Dante knew something was wrong before Elena said a word, because Dante Ricci had spent his entire life reading the small betrayals of the human face, and Elena's face had learned, in the days after the FBI approached her, to hide something. He did not know what, but he knew the shape of the hiding, and it ate at him. His response to the fear he could not name was the response of a man who had never learned any other. He tightened his grip. He added a second guard. He asked casually where she had been, who she had spoken to, and hated himself for the smallness of it, even as he could not stop. He was jealous, he realized with disgust, though he did not yet know of what. Jealous of her time, her attention, the parts of her mind that went somewhere he could not follow. The jealousy found a target at a party. It was a charity gala the family used for laundering respectability, and Elena, radiant in a gown the colour of deep water, was cornered by a man Dante knew, Dr. Adrian Cole, a celebrated surgeon, handsome in the smooth, expensive way of men who had never bled for anything. Cole had known Elena for years, it emerged. They had trained together. He put his hand on her arm when he laughed. He leaned close. He said something that made her smile, the private, easy smile of shared history. A smile Dante had worked 8 weeks to earn, and this man summoned in a sentence. Dante crossed the room. "Elena," he said, and his voice was pleasant, and everyone within 10 feet went quiet, because they heard what was underneath the pleasant. "You'll introduce me." "Dante, this is Dr. Adrian Cole. We trained together at Hopkins. Adrian, this is—" Dante Ricci, Cole said, and his smile flickered because everyone knew the name. The patron. Elena's told me you've been very generous. Have you? Dante said to Elena, still pleasant. Told him things. The temperature of the conversation dropped 10 degrees. Elena felt it, and her spine straightened. I told him you fund the trauma wing, she said evenly. Which you do. Adrian, it was lovely to catch up. Excuse us. She took Dante's arm, not gently, and steered him toward the terrace, and the moment the doors closed behind them, she rounded on him.
What was that? He had his hand on you. He's a colleague. He looked at you like... Like what, Dante? Her eyes flashed. Like I'm a person with a life that existed before you bought me? I trained with that man for 6 years. We are friends. That's all there has ever been. But even if it weren't, she stepped closer, furious, fearless, the woman who'd faced him down over a dying child. I am not a thing you own. You keep forgetting that. You keep sliding back into it. The guards, the questions, and now this. I chose you. Do you understand the difference? I chose this, and the second you treat me like property, instead of like a woman who could walk out that door, you make the choice for me, and you make it wrong. Dante stood very still in the cold air. The city burned below them, and the terrible truth of what she'd said landed in him like the bullet had, deep and vital. You're right, he said. I'm what? You're right. He turned away from her, gripping the railing, his knuckles white. I don't know how to do this. Do you understand? I have never in my life had something I was afraid to lose that could choose to leave. My money can't leave. My power can't leave. My men can't leave. They'd die. You are the only thing I have ever had that stays because it wants to, and it terrifies me, and I don't have any. His voice cracked, and Dante Ricci's voice never cracked. I don't have any tools for it, except the ones that hold things by force, and those are the exact tools that will make you go. Elena's anger drained out of her all at once. Dante. When I was 12, I decided never to love anything again, because loving my father is what made watching him die feel like being skinned alive. He still would not look at her, and I kept that promise for 22 years, and then a doctor told me not to die because it was inconvenient, and now I stand on a balcony jealous of a man because he made you smile. And I am so far outside anything I know how to survive that I... He stopped. His shoulders were shaking. Elena crossed to him and turned him around and held his face the way she had held it in the OR, the way she held things that were breaking. I'm not going anywhere, she said. Not because you own me, because I don't want to. But you have to trust that, Dante. You have to let it be a thing I give you, not a thing you take, or it's worthless. And worse than worthless, it's a leash on both our throats. She wiped his face the way he had once wiped hers. Can you do that? Can you love something with an open hand? Because I can't be loved with a closed one. I'll die in it. I'll become a ghost of myself, and you'll have a body in a beautiful cage, and you'll have lost me anyway. Dante looked at her for a long time, and then he did the hardest thing he had ever done, harder than burying his father, harder than ordering blood. He let go of the railing, and he took her hand, and he opened his own hand under it, palm up, holding without gripping.
Teach me, he said. I don't know how, but teach me and I'll learn.
I learned Latin and Sicilian and how to run an empire before I was 20. I can learn this. His black eyes held hers. For you, I can learn to hold something without a fist. And Elena, whose coat still hid a card that could put this man in a grave, felt her heart break clean in two. One half for the choice she was going to have to make, and one half for how much, God help her, she loved him. Special Agent Reyes was patient, and patience was a weapon. She let 2 weeks pass before she made contact again, and when she did, it was surgical. Elena arrived at her Bronx General shift to find Reyes in scrubs, credentials borrowed or forged, waiting in the doctor's lounge as if she belonged there. "You didn't call," Reyes said. "I'm not going to call." "You kept the card, though." You didn't throw it away. I know you didn't, because if you had, you'd have said so just now instead of getting that look. Reyes poured herself coffee like she had all the time in the world. That look is a woman who's still deciding, so let me help you decide. She slid a folder across the table. Elena did not open it. Open it, Doctor. You're good at looking at ugly things. It's your job. Elena opened it. Inside were photographs, bodies, a man in a car trunk, a man in a river, bloated. A young man, she recognized him, one of Dante's soldiers who had simply stopped appearing in a shallow grave. These are the last 3 people who inconvenienced the Ricci family, Reyes said quietly. The man in the trunk skimmed money. The man in the river talked to the wrong person. The boy in the grave, we don't even know what he did. Maybe nothing. Maybe he just knew too much, like you know too much. She let that land. This is your future, Eleanor, not the penthouse, this. You are a loose thread in a world that pulls loose threads, and the only reason you're alive is that a man's affection is a mood, and moods change. When they change, you go in a river. I've seen it 100 times. Eleanor closed the folder. Her hands were steady, but only because she made them. He wouldn't. They all say that. Reyes leaned forward. Here's what I actually need, and it's small, and it's safe. Not a wire, not testimony, not yet. I need one thing. Confirmation of a meeting. In 3 weeks, the 5 families are gathering. We know it's happening, we don't know where. You'll hear it, living where you live. You tell me the place and that's all. You never appear, Ricci never knows, and in exchange, I put you in the program the day it's over. New name, new coast, free, alive. No blood on your hands and none on your conscience, because you'll have helped us stop exactly the kind of violence you've spent your whole life trying to undo. It was, Elena understood, a masterful pitch. Reyes had found the exact seam in her, not fear, but her hatred of violence, the thing that had defined her since her father bled on a church floor. She was offering Elena a way to be, at last, on the right side, to fight the darkness instead of dressing its wounds. And Dante? Elena heard herself ask. Reyes's face did not change. Dante Ricci goes to prison for the rest of his life, where he belongs. He's killed people, Elena. Real people. With mothers. The man who makes you feel special has made 100 other people disappear. Sentiment doesn't change what he is. That was true. That was the unbearable thing. It was all true. Elena stood. I need to think. 3 weeks, Reyes said. That's your whole timeline. After the meeting, the offer's gone, and you're just another woman in a beautiful apartment waiting for the mood to change. She gathered the folder. You're a good person, Doctor. You've spent your life saving lives. Don't let this one man convince you that the man who takes them is worth your soul. Elena worked her shift in a daze. She saved a stabbing victim and a heart attack and a child with asthma, and her hands never faltered, and her mind never stopped screaming. Because Reyes was right about the bodies, and Elena was right about Dante's hand opening under hers on the balcony. Both were true. She loved a man who filled rivers with bodies, and who was, at that very moment, somewhere in the city, trying to learn how to love her with an open hand, because she had asked him to. Both men were real. The room he'd built inside himself was real, and so was the man outside it. That night, Dante was waiting for her with dinner he had made himself. Badly, endearingly, the kitchen a disaster. Because she had once mentioned that no one had ever cooked for her. It's terrible, she said, tasting it, tears standing in her eyes for reasons he could not know. It's aggressively terrible, he agreed. I burned the first 2 attempts. Salvatore thinks I've lost my mind. He may be right. He watched her face. Why are you crying? Because you burned dinner twice for me, she said, and it was even true. Because nobody ever burned anything for me before. Dante came around the table and pulled her up into his arms and held her. Open hands, she noticed. He was trying. He was actually trying. And she pressed her face into his chest, right over the eagle, right over the scar she had sewn, and she thought, I cannot do it. I cannot give him to them. And I cannot stay and watch the rivers fill. And in 3 weeks I will have to choose. And there is no choice. There is no door. There is only which grave I dig. His, or the one I climb into to escape him. I've got you, Dante murmured into her hair, not knowing he was comforting her about himself. Whatever it is. I've got you. Open hands. I'm learning. You're safe. And Elena Voss, held by a killer who was trying to become gentle, wept for the impossibility of loving him, and let him believe the tears were only joy. Vincent Ricci chose a Sunday, because their mother had loved Sundays, and because he had a sense of theatre that Dante had always found tiresome. He came to the penthouse with his own men and a smile, ostensibly to celebrate his brother's recovery, actually to measure it. Dante received him graciously. The 2 brothers embraced, and Elena, watching from across the room, felt every hair on her body stand up, because she had spent her life reading the bodies of the frightened and the dying, and Vincent Ricci's body was the body of a predator, pretending to be a guest. You look well, brother, Vincent said, holding Dante at arm's length. For a dead man, the whole city thought you were finished. The whole city was misinformed. So I see. And you have... Vincent's eyes slid to Elena and lingered, and Dante went very still. Acquired a companion, the famous doctor, the one who saw the mark and lived. He smiled at Elena, and his smile was Dante's smile turned rancid, the same features arranged around cruelty instead of control. You've made yourself quite the legend, Dr. Voss, the exception to the law that has no exceptions. People talk. They wonder what makes you so special
that my brother would break 100 years of tradition. Vincent, Dante said softly. They wonder if he's gone soft, Vincent continued, still smiling at Elena.
A boss who breaks the oldest law for a woman, who sends an enemy's son home with a note, who fires half the questions his soldiers ask him. People wonder, Dante, if the man who came back from that car is the same man who got into it, or if maybe, he finally looked at his brother, maybe the doctor saved the body and lost the boss somewhere on the table. The room was very quiet. You should be careful, Dante said, how you speak in my house. Of course, family should always be careful with each other. Vincent's smile widened. That's the whole trick of it, isn't it? Being careful with family. He left an hour later, all warmth and kisses, and the moment the door closed, Dante crossed to the window and stood there rigid, and Elena came to him. It was him, she said. It was not a question. She had watched it in his face. The shooting, the car, it was your brother. Yes. You've known this whole time? Since before I woke up in your hospital, more or less. The shooters knew things only family knew. Dante's reflection in the glass was carved from ice. I've been waiting, letting him think I don't know, letting him get comfortable, get greedy, make a mistake. It's the only way to take a man in your own family. You can't just kill your brother, Elena. The other families would see it as chaos, as weakness. They'd descend like wolves. I have to make him move first. I have to make him the aggressor in front of everyone, so that when I end it, it's justice and not fratricide. Elena's blood ran cold because she understood suddenly and completely what this meant. The meeting, she said, the gathering of the families. That's where it happens. That's where you force his hand. Dante turned to her sharply. How do you know about the meeting? And there it was, the precipice. She had walked right to the edge of it without meaning to, and now she stood swaying over the drop, and she had a half-second to decide whether to fall. You mentioned it, she lied, and hated herself. Weeks ago, on the phone, I heard you. Dante studied her. For one endless moment, she thought he saw through it. Those eyes that read every face saw hers. But then something in him chose to believe her, because he wanted to, because loving with an open hand meant choosing trust, and he had promised to learn. Yes, he said, the meeting, in 3 weeks. Every family, every boss, neutral ground. Vincent will make his move there, or arrange to, and I'll be ready. He pulled her against him. It's why I need you close and safe and away from all of it. If Vincent understood what you are to me, his arms tightened. You're the one card I can't let him hold. Do you understand? A man like Vincent, he doesn't come at me. He'd come at you, because he knows that's the only place left where I can still bleed. Elena stood in his arms with the knowledge of the FBI's card burning in the coat in her closet, and understood that she now held the location of the one meeting where Dante would either destroy his brother or die trying, and that Special Agent Reyes wanted that exact location, and that if she gave it to Reyes, the FBI would raid the meeting, and in the chaos, anything could happen. Dante could go to prison. Or Dante, distracted by a federal raid, could be exactly vulnerable enough for Vincent to finish what he'd started in the rain. She had thought she was choosing between freedom and love. She saw now that she was choosing whether the man she loved lived or died, and that both her exits led through the same 3 weeks, and that she was the only person alive standing at the center of all of it,
holding every thread. "I understand," she whispered. "Say you'll stay away from it," Dante said. "Say you'll stay safe. I've never asked you for anything. I'm asking for this." "I'll stay safe," Elena said. It was the third lie she had told him in an hour, and it was the one that would cost the most. Because she already knew, standing in his arms over the burning city, in the beautiful cage that had become the only home she wanted, that there was no version of the next 3 weeks in which she stayed safe. There was only which danger she chose, and she had already, without admitting it even to herself, begun to choose him. Elena made her decision in the small hours of a sleepless night, and she made it the way she made every decision that mattered, with her eyes open, counting the cost. She would not give Reyes the meeting. She had turned it over 1,000 ways, and every way that ended with the FBI at that gathering also ended with Dante exposed, either to a prison cell or to his brother's bullet in the chaos. She could not do it. Not because she had stopped hating what he was, she would never stop, but because she had finally, fully admitted the thing she'd been refusing for weeks, that she was in love with Dante Ricci, wholly and ruinously, and that love was not a mood, whatever Reyes said. It was the truest thing she had. But refusing Reyes was not free. Reyes had made that clear. A woman who refused the FBI in Elena's position did not simply go back to her life. Reyes would burn her, leak that she'd been approached, let it reach the wrong ears, make it look like she'd said yes. It was the oldest play in the book. If I can't have you as an asset, I'll make you useless to them. Because a Ricci doctor suspected of talking to the FBI is a dead Ricci doctor, and a dead doctor sends a message to the next one. So Elena did the only thing left to a woman standing between two men who each would kill to own her secrets. She told Dante the truth. She did it on the terrace at dawn because she wanted the light. She told him everything: Reyes, the card, the folder of bodies, the offer of freedom, the demand for the meeting, all of it. She watched his face turn to stone as she spoke, watched the warden rise up behind his eyes, watched the man she loved recede and the boss she feared take his place. And she kept talking anyway, because she had decided that whatever they were going to be, it would not be built on the things she'd hidden in her closet. When she finished, there was a long, terrible silence. "How long?" Dante said. His voice was the flat, dead voice of the 3 a.m. phone calls. "How long have you had the card?" "Since before the gala." "You've been carrying an FBI contact for a month." He turned away from her, and the distance in it was worse than any violence. "You lied to me about the meeting. You said I mentioned it on the phone. You lied to my face, in my arms, and I chose to believe you because I was busy learning to love you with an open hand." A terrible laugh. The open hand, God! I taught myself the one lesson that could get me killed, and you were the teacher. "Dante, did you tell her?" He rounded on her, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw murder look out of his eyes at her, and she made herself not step back. "The meeting, the location. Did you give it to her?" "No. Why should I believe you? You've done nothing but lie." "Because I'm telling you now," Elena said, and her voice did not shake, and that steadiness reached him where nothing else could. "I could have given her the meeting and never said a word, and let you walk into a federal raid or your brother's gun, and you'd never have known it was me. That was the easy path, Dante, the safe path.
I could have taken freedom and let you fall, and been on a beach in another name by summer. She stepped toward him, into the range of his fury, deliberately. I'm standing here instead, telling you everything, burning my own exit in front of you, because I chose you. Not the version of you that's safe to love. There is no such version. I chose the whole thing. The room inside you and the man outside it, all of it. And I will not build it on a lie, so here is the truth, and you can do what you want with it. Believe me or put me in the river. But I'm done hiding. Dante Ricci stared at the woman who had just handed him her own throat. And something broke in him. Not the cold thing, but the wall around it. Because no one had ever done this. No one had ever chosen him with their eyes open and their exit burned. His father had been loved and murdered for it. His brother had smiled and shot him. Every relationship he had ever had was a transaction with a knife hidden in it. And here was a woman who had held every card, freedom, his ruin, her own survival, and laid them all face up on the table because she loved him and would not lie. He crossed the space between them and took her face in his hands, hard, desperate, and pressed his forehead to hers, and she felt him shaking. You could have been free, he said, wrecked. You could have walked away from all of it, from me. I know. Why didn't you? Because I love you, Elena said, out loud, for the first time. That's the whole stupid answer. I love you, and I hate what you are, and both of those are going to be true every day for the rest of my life, and I chose it anyway.
Now stop asking me why and help me figure out what we do about the fact that there's a very dangerous woman with a badge who's about to find out I said no. Dante pulled back and looked at her, and slowly, the boss and the man came back together behind his eyes into a single person. A person who, for the first time, was not alone. We do what I do best, he said, and there was iron in it, and something almost like hope. We turn a threat into a weapon. You said Reyes wants the meeting. Then we're going to give her a meeting. He almost smiled. Just not the real one. And we're going to use it to bury my brother and your FBI in the same grave. The plan was Dante's, and it was beautiful, and it was the kind of thing that reminded Elena exactly what her lover was. Reyes wants a location, Dante said, spreading it out for her and Salvatore in the low light of his study. Vincent wants an opportunity, so we give them both the same, false one, and we let them destroy each other while the real business happens somewhere else. Salvatore, who had been suspicious of Elena for months, looked at her now with grudging new respect. She had brought them the FBI's move. She had, in doing so, handed the family a weapon it could not have found on its own. You'll tell Reyes the meeting is at the Aragona warehouse in Red Hook, Dante said. 3 weeks from Friday, midnight. It's a real Ricci property. It'll check out. It's exactly where such a thing might happen. She'll believe it because it's true enough. And Vincent? Vincent, I tell myself, carefully. I let it slip. The way I let the wrong thing slip to the man I know is leaking to him. There's a soldier, Fabio, I've suspected for weeks. I feed Fabio the same location and time, and I let Vincent believe I'll be there, alone but for a light guard, distracted, an easy target. His chance to finish the job from the rain. Dante's eyes were black glass.
So on that Friday, at that warehouse, we will have my brother arriving to murder me, and the FBI arriving to arrest a summit of bosses, neither knowing about the other, and me not there at all. Elena saw it. Vincent walks into a federal raid. Vincent walks in with guns, expecting his brother, and finding Karen Reyes. He'll shoot his way out, or he won't, but either way, he's finished. Caught on federal wire committing to my murder, or dead in a shootout with agents, or in a cell.
And Reyes gets a warehouse full of armed Riccis who are not the ones she wanted, led by the man who tried to kill me. She gets a win. She stops hunting you because you delivered. He turned to Elena. And the real meeting, the actual summit where I need to be, happens 2 nights earlier, quietly, and no one who matters ever knows the Aragona warehouse was a stage. It was ruthless and elegant, and it turned 2 deadly threats into a single self-consuming fire, and Elena understood that she was watching genius, and that the genius was a murderer, and that she loved him, and that all of this was going to be true forever. There's a flaw, she said, because she had spent her life finding the thing that would kill the patient. Vincent said something at the party. He said you'd gone soft because of me. He knows what I am to you. If he's smart, and he's your brother, he's smart, he won't just take the bait about the warehouse, he'll take out insurance. He'll come at the thing you can't afford to lose. She met Dante's eyes. He'll come at me. The study went silent. Dante's face changed. She watched him run it, the way he'd taught her to see, the moves clicking forward, and she watched him arrive at the same terrible place she had. "Then you don't leave my sight," he said. "Not for 1 hour. Doubled guard, the safe floor, no shifts at the hospital until it's done. Dante, I'll wall you in with concrete and steel and 40 men. Dante!" She took his hands. "Open," she reminded him with her eyes. "Open hands. You can't lock me in a box and win a war at the same time. If you spend the next 3 weeks guarding me, Vincent will know exactly how much I'm worth, and he'll want me even more. The way to keep me safe isn't to hide me. It's to finish him before he can move. Fast. So there's no window." Salvatore spoke, quietly, the old strategist. "She's right, Dante. Fortifying her tells Vincent where the treasure is buried. Better she looks like nothing. Better she keeps her routine, guarded but ordinary, while we close the trap early." Dante looked between them, and Elena watched him fight every instinct he had, the fist wanting to close, and she watched him force it open by will alone. "2 guards you never see," he said finally to her. "You keep your routine. You look like a doctor and nothing more. And the moment anything feels wrong, you say the word and I burn the whole plan down to get to you. The war is not worth you. Do you understand me? I will lose the family before I lose you. I mean that with my whole life." "I know," Elena said softly. "That's the problem, my love. Vincent knows it too." They moved the pieces over the following days with terrible care. Reyes got her warehouse, delivered by Elena in a shaking phone call that did not have to fake its fear. Fabio got his whisper and passed it along, and Dante watched the leak travel with the cold satisfaction of a man whose diagnosis had proved correct. The real summit was set for a Wednesday, moved and quiet. And for 11 days, it worked. For 11 days the trap tightened and no one sprang it early.
And Elena went to the hospital and came home and lay in Dante's arms at night while he held her with hands he was teaching painfully to stay open. On the 12th day, walking from Bronx General to her car, Elena Voss felt the world go wrong. Her 2 guards were not where they should be. The car was there, but the driver was slumped, and a van she did not recognize was already moving, its door already open, and before she could scream, a man had her, a cloth over her face that stank of chemicals and endings, and the last thing she saw as the dark took her was a face in the van's window that she knew. Not Vincent. Worse.
She knew that face because she had sewn it up 8 weeks ago, because she had told him not to bite her, because she had stitched a rabbit's ear for him and sent him home to his father with a note. She had been wrong about who wanted her. Elena woke on a concrete floor with a headache like a spike through her eye and the immediate professional understanding that she had been dosed with something crude and would be nauseous soon. She catalogued herself the way she catalogued patients, alive, unbound hands, a rope on her ankles, no serious injury. Then she catalogued the room, cold, industrial, the smell of the harbour, and a man sitting across from her in a folding chair, watching her wake. Angelo Moretti did not look like a monster either. That was the thing Elena kept learning about this world. None of them did. He looked like a tired, middle-aged man in an expensive coat, with grief worn into the lines of his face, like water into stone. Beside him, half hidden, stood a boy clutching a threadbare rabbit. "Matteo," Elena said, and her voice cracked. "You're all right. The shoulder healed clean?" The boy's eyes went huge. He looked up at his father. "He healed," Angelo said. His voice was rough, accented, quiet. "Because of you. He told me. The blonde doctor who fixed Capitano's ear and said she doesn't break promises." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I have thought about you for 2 months, Dr. Voss, about what to do about you, because you are the reason my son came home, and you are also the property of the man who is at war with me, and those 2 things have been fighting in my chest for 2 months. I'm not property." "No?" Angelo's tired eyes searched her face. "Ricci broke the oldest law of our world to keep you. He returned my son alive, a thing no boss in 100 years would do, because you asked him to. I have made it my business to understand you, and what I understand is this. You are the one thing Dante Ricci loves, which makes you, Dr. Voss, the most valuable object in the city of New York." Elena's stomach turned, and not only from the drug. "So this is a kidnapping. You took me to use against him." "I took you," Angelo said, "because someone was going to, and I would rather it was me." He said it with a weariness that stopped her cold. "There is a war coming, Doctor. Not the one you think. Dante believes his brother wants his chair. That is true. But Vincent has come to me 3 times. He has offered me an alliance. Help him take his brother down, and he'll give me the docks, the peace, everything I've bled for. All I have to do is help him kill Dante." Angelo's jaw tightened. "And 2 months ago I would have said yes without a thought. Dante Ricci has killed men I loved. But then my son came home, with his ear-stitched rabbit and a note that said it was never his. And I found I could not stop thinking about a man who would write that." Elena sat very still.
Why am I here, Angelo? Because I need to know what he is now. The old Don leaned back. I need to know if the note was real or a trick. If Dante Ricci is a man who can be at peace with, or only a monster wearing a moment of mercy like a mask.
And you, the woman he broke his own law for, you are the only honest answer I will ever get. So I took you. And now we wait. And how he comes for you will tell me everything I need to know about whether I take Vincent's hand or refuse it. He looked at her almost gently. If he comes with an army and burns my house down, he is the old kind of boss, and I side with the brother, and we end him. If he comes some other way, Angelo spread his hands, then perhaps there is a different future. But he will come. That much even Vincent and I agree on. The only question is, what walks through my door when he does? Elena understood then the extraordinary and terrible position she was in. She was not a hostage in a simple war. She was a test. Angelo Moretti had, in his grief and his exhaustion, made her the instrument by which he would decide the fate of every family in New York, including whether the man she loved lived or died. And Vincent was out there, waiting, expecting Dante to react like the boss he'd always been. "Let me tell you something about Dante Ricci," Elena said, and her voice was steady now, the drug burning off, her mind clear and cold as an operating theatre. "You want to know what he is now? I'll save you the wait. He is a man who is teaching himself, at 34 years old, in agony, how to hold something without crushing it. Because I asked him to. He sent your son home not as a trick, but because he looked at a crying boy with a rabbit and saw himself at 12 standing in his father's blood. That's who's coming for me, Angelo. Not the old boss. Not the monster. A man who promised me he'd lose the whole family before he'd lose me, and who is, right now, trying, against everything he is, to be worth being loved." Angelo Moretti looked at her for a long, long moment, and in his tired eyes, Elena saw something shift. Not decision, not yet, but the beginning of belief. "Then let us hope," the old man said quietly, "that you are right about him. Because if you are wrong, Doctor, we all die. And your Dante most of all." Behind him, the boy Matteo crept forward and pressed the threadbare rabbit into Elena's bound hands. "For being brave," he whispered. "Papa, she can hold Capitano. She's the doctor. She doesn't break promises." And Elena Voss held a stitched rabbit in a Brooklyn warehouse and prayed to a god she wasn't sure she believed in that the man she loved had learned enough, fast enough, to walk through that door as the man she'd described and not the one she feared. Dante Ricci learned Elena was gone at 6:52 in the evening, and for 11 seconds he was not a man at all. Salvatore, who was in the room, would describe it later as the most frightening thing he had witnessed in 50 years in the life. Not rage, not shouting, but a total stillness, a silence like the moment before a building comes down. Dante stood with the phone in his hand, and his face emptied of everything, and Salvatore understood that they had arrived at the hinge of history, that whatever Dante did in the next hour would echo for a generation.
Then Dante set down the phone, and when he spoke, his voice was calm, and the calm was worse than any scream. Who? They pieced it together fast. The guards drugged, not killed, professional, restrained, not Vincent's style. Vincent left bodies. A van traced to a shell company, and then Fabio, the leak, brought in and made to talk, sobbing, confessing that Vincent had partnered with someone, that the plan had changed, that Vincent had told him the Morettis were in it now. Moretti, Dante said, and a different stillness came over him, because this was a puzzle with an answer, and answers he could work with. Every instinct in him, 34 years of instinct forged in his father's blood, screamed the same command: burn it down, find the Moretti stronghold, and put every man in it in the ground.
Send 100 soldiers. Level the docks. Make the city understand what it cost to touch what belonged to Dante Ricci. It was what his father would have done. It was what Vincent expected, was counting on, because a war between Ricci and Moretti was exactly the chaos Vincent needed to slip in and take the throne over both their corpses. Dante stood in his study with the fist inside him closing, and he heard Elena's voice. Open hands, or it's worthless. You've been playing this game your whole life, 3 moves ahead, and where has it gotten you? What if the move nobody expects is the one where you just do the decent thing and let it cost you? He looked at Salvatore. Angelo took her, not Vincent. Vincent would have sent me a finger by now to prove it and make me move.
Angelo took her and he's gone quiet. Why? Salvatore, slowly. Because he doesn't want war. If he wanted war, he'd have made the demand. Silence means he wants something else. He's asking a question. He's asking what I am. Dante closed his eyes, and the whole shape of it came clear, the way the false warehouse plan had come clear. Genius meeting genius, except this time the answer was not a trap, but a surrender. Vincent went to Angelo for an alliance, and Angelo hasn't taken it. He's waiting. He's using her to decide. If I come like my father, like Vincent wants, Angelo takes the alliance and they bury me together. If I come some other way, he opened his eyes. Then I split them. Then Vincent is alone. Dante, if you go to Moretti's ground without an army, unprotected, he could kill you. It could be exactly the trap. Then it's the trap, Dante said, and I walk into it with open hands, because that's the only move on the board that gets her back alive and doesn't hand my brother the city. And because, his voice caught just slightly, because she asked me to learn how to do this, to let the decent thing cost me. Well, here is the cost. I'll pay it. He went alone. That was the thing that broke the pattern, the thing no one in his world would ever have believed. Dante Ricci drove himself to the Brooklyn docks at midnight, unarmed, in a single car, and walked to the door of Angelo Moretti's warehouse, with his empty hands held open at his sides, and told the shocked soldiers who levelled guns at him, "Take me to Angelo. I'm not here for war. I'm here for the woman." Tell him the man who wrote the note has come to answer his question in person. They brought him in. And when the door opened and Dante saw Elena, alive, unhurt, sitting on a crate with a stuffed rabbit in her lap and her chin up like a queen, something in his chest that had been a fist for 11 seconds finally fully opened and stayed open.
He did not run to her. He did not draw a weapon he did not have. He looked at Angelo Moretti, and he did the hardest thing a man of his world could do. He knelt. Not in defeat, in something older and harder than defeat. He went down on one knee on the cold concrete before his enemy, and every Moretti soldier in the room went silent with disbelief. And Dante Ricci said, "You have my life. I came alone and unarmed onto your ground.
You can end the Ricci family tonight, right here, and no one would blame you. I killed your cousin. Your father knew mine. There's blood between us 3 generations deep." His voice was steady and clear. "But I returned your son because it was right, not because it was clever. And I'm kneeling now, because that woman is worth more to me than my pride, my family, or my life. And I would rather die on your floor with my hands open than live one more day as the kind of man who'd win her back with an army. So, here I am, Angelo. This is your answer. This is what I am now. Do what you want with it." The silence in the warehouse was total, and Elena Voss, watching the coldest man in New York kneel unarmed before his enemy for her sake, understood that he had not just learned the lesson. He had become it. Angelo Moretti looked down at the kneeling man for a long, long moment. Then he began, very quietly, to laugh. Not cruelly, but like a man who has waited his whole life to be surprised, and finally, blessedly, has been. "Get up, Dante Ricci," he said. "Get up. My son was right about the doctor." He reached down and, astonishingly, offered his hand. "She doesn't break promises, and it seems neither anymore do you." They talked until dawn. It was not a thing either man's father could have imagined. Ricci and Moretti at the same table, no guns drawn, an old grief set down between them, like a body they had both carried too long. Angelo poured wine. Elena sat close to Dante, with the rabbit still in her lap, and under the table his hand found hers, open, and did not let go. "Vincent came to me 3 times, Angelo said. The last time 2 weeks ago. He knew about the doctor, about what she is to you. He said if I took her, you'd come like a bull, and between us we'd have you. He'd give me the docks and the West Piers for my trouble. He wants your chair, Dante, and he's willing to burn both our houses to sit in it. I know what my brother wants." Dante's voice was flat. "He's wanted it since we were boys. He watched our father love me more and never forgave it. The shooting in the rain, that was him. He's been the knife in my family for 20 years, and I let him because he's my blood, and because some part of me still sees the kid I taught to ride a bicycle." His jaw hardened. "That part of me is what nearly got me killed. I'm done with it." So, Angelo leaned back. "The question is what we do about him, because he's still out there, and he still thinks I've taken his deal. He thinks, right now, that you're on your way here with an army, and that when you arrive, he and I will be waiting to end you, together." Elena sat up. "Then that's the trap. That's the real one." She looked between the 2 men. "He's expecting Dante to come like a bull. He's expecting you 2 to be enemies. He has no idea you're sitting here drinking wine.
So you let him keep believing it. You let him walk into the exact ambush he set, except the two men he thinks are killing each other are standing side by side. Both Dons looked at her. "She's wasted on medicine," Angelo said. "She's wasted on me," Dante said, and meant it. They built it in the grey hours before morning. Angelo would contact Vincent and tell him it was done. The doctor was taken. Dante was coming. The alliance was on. He'd give Vincent a place and a time. The Aragona warehouse. The same false stage Dante had already built for the FBI. It was almost too perfect. Vincent would arrive expecting to help murder his brother. Instead, he'd find his brother alive and whole, allied with the Moretti family he thought he'd bought, and, Dante's cold smile returned, Special Agent Karen Reyes, who Elena would tip to a changed location, bringing the full weight of the federal government down on a warehouse containing Vincent Ricci and his loyalists in the act of conspiracy to murder. "Two enemies," Dante said softly. "My brother and the Bureau. And we let them break against each other on a stage I built, while we stand outside it, clean." He looked at Elena. "Your agent Reyes gets the biggest arrest of her career. Vincent Ricci, caught red-handed, plus whatever soldiers he brings. She gets her win. She stops needing you. And Vincent goes to prison for the rest of his life, which is worse for him than a bullet, because he'll have to live knowing he lost." "And the note?" Elena asked Angelo quietly. "Your son, the war between your families, is it?" "Over," Angelo said, and the weariness lifted from him as he said it, decades of it. "My boy came home. This man knelt on my floor. I'm an old man, Doctor, and I'm tired of coffins. If Dante Ricci wants peace, he has it. God knows our fathers never gave us any." He raised his glass. "To hands that let something go." They drank to it, but when the planning was done, and Angelo's men had gone to make the calls, Elena pulled Dante aside into the grey dawn light by the water, and she saw that beneath the strategist's calm, something in him was breaking. "He's your brother," she said. "He tried to kill me. He took you." "I know, and he's the boy you taught to ride a bicycle. Dante." She took his face in her hands. "I need to know you understand what you're about to do. You're going to send your own brother to prison for life. That's not a chess move. That's the last of your family. After tonight, there's no one left who remembers your father's laugh but you. I need you to feel that before you do it, or it'll rot you from the inside, and I won't watch that happen to you." Dante closed his eyes, and for the first time since she'd known him, he let her see it. The grief, raw and enormous, the 12-year-old and the 34-year-old, both mourning at once. "I lost Vincent a long time ago," he said, his voice thick. "The night our father died, I think. We stood in the same blood, and it made me cold, and it made him hungry. And we've been strangers wearing brothers' faces ever since. Tonight, I'm not losing him. I'm just finally admitting he's already gone." He opened his eyes, and they were wet, and he did not hide it. "The only family I have left is standing in front of me, holding a stuffed rabbit. Everyone else is a ghost or a grave. So yes, I feel it. I feel it, and I'm doing it anyway.
because you taught me the difference between the family you're born into and the family you choose.
And I choose you.
Elena kissed him then, in the grey light off the water, with a stuffed rabbit between them and a war about to end. And neither of them spoke for a long time. When they finally drove back to Manhattan, the sun was coming up over the bridges, gilding the whole ruined, beautiful city, and Dante held her hand on the console the entire way, open, his thumb moving over her knuckles like he was memorizing them. "After tonight," he said, watching the road, "when it's done, when Vincent is caged and Angelo has his piece and Reyes has her headline, I want to ask you something, and I don't want you to answer now. I want you to think about it."
Ask me.
"I want to leave."
The words came out of him like a confession. Not all of it. You can't just walk out of this life. It doesn't let you.
But most of it. Hand the operation to men I trust, keep the clean parts, shed the blood. Disappear into something small and legitimate and quiet. He glanced at her. "There's a house in Sicily, my grandmother's. On a cliff above the sea, white walls, water that goes on forever. I haven't seen it since I was a boy. I used to think about it when I was dying in your hospital." His voice roughened. "I want to take you there, Elena. I want to wake up next to you, somewhere the darkness can't find us. Or at least, somewhere it has to work harder. I want to be a man with a name no one fears. Just for you. Just with you." Elena looked at the man beside her, the coldest, most dangerous man in New York, offering to dismantle an empire for a house above the sea. And she thought about her father, the pastor, who had spent his life believing that even the darkest man could be pulled toward the light if someone loved him enough to try. "I'll think about it," she said. But she was already smiling, and he saw it, and something 22 years frozen in him began, at last, to thaw. Vincent Ricci arrived at the Aragona warehouse at 11:45 on Friday night, and he was in an excellent mood. He had waited 20 years for this. He could taste it. His brother, the golden son, the one their father had loved, the one who'd inherited the chair that should have been split between them, was walking into a room where the Moretti family and Vincent's own loyal soldiers would end him, and by morning Vincent would be the last Ricci standing, master of a city, avenger of a slight he'd nursed since he was a boy, in the shadow of his brother's light. He brought 15 men. He brought guns enough for a war. He brought in his breast pocket a photograph of their father because he wanted the old man to watch. What Vincent did not bring was any idea that his brother was, at that moment, sitting in a car 6 blocks away with the woman he loved, listening to a police scanner and waiting. The warehouse was dark when Vincent's men swept it, empty, set up for a meeting that would never happen. Chairs, a long table, the staging Dante had built weeks ago for the FBI's benefit. "Where is he?" Vincent said. "Where's Angelo? He said midnight." "Boss," one of his men said, uneasy, "something's wrong. There's nobody here. No Moretti soldiers, no—" That was when the doors blew open and the night filled with light and sound and the amplified, unmistakable voice of the federal government. "FBI!
Everybody down! Hands where we can see them! Down! Down!" Karen Reyes had come with everything. She had come expecting a summit of the 5 families, the arrest of a generation, the case that would make her a legend. What she found instead was Vincent Ricci and 15 armed men in a warehouse that had been tipped at the last minute as the changed location, armed in the act of a conspiracy, caught cold on a dozen cameras and as many wires. It was not the arrest she'd wanted. It was, she would realize by morning, an even better one. Because the doctor's final tip had come with a gift attached, an anonymous package delivered to the bureau that same night, containing everything Vincent had ever said to Fabio the informant. Wire recordings of Vincent Ricci commissioning the murder of his own brother, arranging the kidnapping of a federal person of interest, conspiring across family lines. Enough to bury Vincent under the prison. Enough to make Reyes's career. Enough that she would never, ever need Dr. Elena Voss again. Vincent did not go down easy. There was shouting, a scuffle, a single shot into the ceiling that nearly ended several lives. But he was outnumbered and outgunned and outmaneuvered. And when they finally forced him to his knees on the concrete floor of the empty warehouse, cuffs biting his wrists, he understood at last that he had been played. "Dante," he said, to no one, to the empty room. "Dante, you son of a—" And then he began to laugh, a broken, disbelieving laugh, because even now, even ruined, he could appreciate the beauty of it. His brother had let him build his own noose, had fed him the location, had turned the Moretti alliance into a phantom and the FBI into a weapon, had beaten him without firing a shot, without dirtying his hands, without even being in the room. 6 blocks away, in the dark of the car, Dante listened to the scanner report the arrest. Multiple in custody. Subject Vincent Ricci detained. No agents down. And he closed his eyes. Elena watched him. She did not say anything. She had learned when not to. "It's done," Dante said finally. His voice was hollow. "He's finished. Life. With what's on those tapes. He'll die in a cell." He opened his eyes and stared through the windshield at nothing. "I just ended my brother. And I did it with open hands. I never touched him. There's not a drop of his blood on me." A terrible pause. "It doesn't feel the way I thought it would." "How does it feel?" "Empty." He looked at her. "Like the last door in the room I built inside myself just closed, and there's nobody left in there but me and a lot of ghosts." Elena reached over and took his hand. Open. She laced her fingers through his. "Then let's leave the room," she said softly. "Both of us. For good." Dante looked down at their joined hands, hers pale and steady, his scarred and finally still, and something moved across his face that she had never seen there in all their months together. Relief. "There's one more thing I have to do," he said. "Angelo, the piece. I want it witnessed, sworn, real, not a handshake in a warehouse, but a thing the whole city knows, so no one ever raises a gun over the old grudge again." He started the car. "And then Salvatore. I have to hand it to Salvatore, the operation, the clean parts, the men who'll run it right. He's old, but he's honest. As honest as this world allows, and the soldiers love him. He can hold it together while I—" He stopped. "While you disappear," Elena said. "While we disappear." He glanced at her,
and there was a question in it, the question he'd told her not to answer yet, still hanging. The scanner crackled with the ordinary business of a city that would never know how close it had come to a war. The rain had started again. It was always raining in this city, Elena thought, this beautiful, terrible place where she had come to save a stranger's life and lost her heart to him instead. And the wipers beat their slow rhythm across the glass. Sicily, Elena said, not a question, an answer. Dante Ricci looked at her, and the coldest man in New York smiled like a boy who had just been told the war was over and he was allowed, at last, to go home.
Sicily, he said. You cannot simply walk out of the life. Everyone who tried to leave had taught the next man that lesson with their absence. But Dante Ricci did not intend to walk out. He intended to build a door where there had never been one, and to walk through it with such care that no one thought to close it behind him. It took 4 months. He did it the way he did everything, patiently, 3 moves ahead, leaving nothing loose. He divided the empire like a surgeon separating conjoined tissue, careful of every vessel. The territories were parcelled to the men who had earned them. The businesses, the clean ones and the ones that could be made clean, were consolidated under Salvatore, who accepted the burden with the grave dignity of a man who had waited his whole life to be trusted and had never expected the trust to come like this.
You understand what you're doing, Salvatore said to him, near the end, in the study where they had planned 100 wars. You're the last of the old blood in the chair. When you go, the Ricci name goes quiet. In a generation, they'll say the family faded. No one will know the boss simply left for a woman. Let them not know, Dante said. Let them say I died. Let them say anything. I don't need the name anymore, Sal. I've carried it since I was 12. It's heavier than the bullet was. He put his hand on the old man's shoulder. You gave my father 40 years. You carried me out of his funeral when my legs wouldn't work. I'm not handing you a throne. I'm handing you a chance to end it clean. To run the clean parts, let the blood dry up, let it become just money and old men playing cards.
That's the only inheritance worth leaving. Not the guns. The quiet after them.
Salvatore's eyes were wet. He was too old and too proud to let the tears fall, but they stood there. Your father would not have understood this. No, but your grandmother would have. The old man almost smiled. She hated the life. She kept that house in Sicily as far from it as the sea would allow. She used to say the family was a fire that warmed you until it burned you. He gripped Dante's hand. Go and be cold, Filio. Go and be gloriously, safely cold, above the water. You've earned the right to be no one. The peace with the Morettis was sworn in front of witnesses from every family, a thing so unprecedented that it held precisely because no one could believe it was happening. Angelo and Dante shook hands in a restaurant with no sign, and Matteo Moretti, 9 years old now, shook Elena's hand very solemnly and told her that Capitano the rabbit had never needed another stitch, and Elena had to leave the table for a moment so no one would see her cry. Karen Reyes got her legend. Vincent Ricci was convicted on the wire evidence, conspiracy, attempted murder, kidnapping, a list as long as the sentence, which was life without parole. Reyes made supervisory special agent within the year. She never learned the true shape of what had happened. never understood that she had been the third blade in a plan she thought she'd run herself. And she never contacted Elena Voss again, because the file on the doctor had been quietly closed the moment Vincent's cell door shut. Elena was free. Not the freedom Reyes had offered, new name, new coast, running, but a stranger freedom, chosen, walking out of one life into another on the arm of the man she loved. There were things Elena had to give up, too, and she grieved them honestly. Bronx General, the patients who came in with nothing, the work that had made her feel like herself for a decade. On her last shift, she saved a boy who'd been shot on the same block she'd once been ambushed on, and she stood in the cold OR she loved and understood that she was closing a door she could never open again. And she wept for it. And Dante held her afterward and did not tell her it would be all right, because he had learned that you do not lie to the people you love. You only hold them while the truth hurts.
"You're giving up your calling," he said, "for me. I know what that costs. I'm giving up an empire, but you, medicine was your whole self." "I'm not giving it up," Elena said, wiping her face. "I'm changing where I do it. There are people in Sicily who get shot too, Dante. There are villages up in the hills with no doctor for 40 kilometers. There are fishermen who fall off boats and children who need someone. I didn't become a surgeon to work in a gleaming tower. I became one to be where the help isn't." She managed a shaky smile. "You're not taking my calling away. You're taking me somewhere it's needed and no one's watching. That's not a cage. That's the opposite. That's the freest thing anyone's ever offered me." They flew out on a grey morning in the 4th month. No fanfare, no farewell. 2 people with a modest amount of luggage boarding an ordinary flight. Dante wore a plain coat and carried no gun for the first time since he was 17. At the gate he stopped and looked back through the great windows at the skyline of the city that had made him and nearly killed him. The city of his father's blood and his brother's betrayal, and the rainy night a doctor had told him not to die. "Any regrets?" Elena asked. Dante Ricci looked at the city a long moment. Then he took her hand, open, always open now. It had become his native language, and turned his back on all of it. "Not one," he said. The house sat on a cliff on the southern coast of Sicily, white-walled and low, with a terracotta roof faded by a century of sun, and a garden gone wild with bougainvillea and lemon trees. Below it the land fell away in terraces of olive and rock, and beyond the rock was the sea, the Mediterranean, impossibly blue, going out and out until it became the sky. In the mornings the water was silver, in the evenings it turned to hammered gold, and at night it was black and vast and full of stars, and the only sound was the waves and the wind in the lemon trees. They had been there a year. The people of the village knew them as Signor and Signora Marino. Dante had chosen his grandmother's maiden name, a small, quiet theft from the life that had been clean. He was, as far as anyone knew, a retired businessman from the north with an American wife who was a doctor, a serious, dark-haired man who kept to himself, but who could be seen most evenings walking the cliff path with his wife's hand in his, and who had, it was said, paid for the new roof on the church without wanting his name attached to it. Elena had a clinic now. 2 rooms in the village, whitewashed, simple, with an examination table and a cabinet of supplies and a line of patients most mornings. Old women with bad hips, fishermen with rope-burned hands, children with fevers,
once a man gored by a bull who would have died without her, and lived because she had happened to be 40 kilometers closer than death. She was the only real doctor for those 40 kilometers. She had never in her life been more necessary or more content. Her German precise consonants had softened into passable Sicilian. Her hands, which had held the heart of the most dangerous man in New York, now mostly held the hands of frightened children while she gave them vaccines. And she found that this, too, was enough. Was more than enough. Dante learned to garden.
It was absurd, and he knew it was absurd, and he did it anyway. Dante Ricci, who had commanded armies, on his knees in the dirt, learning from an 80-year-old neighbour named Nunzio how to prune a lemon tree so it fruited. He was terrible at it for a year, and then, slowly, less terrible. He learned to fish, badly. He learned to sit still in the evening with a glass of wine and watch the light change on the water, and not be planning anything, not be 3 moves ahead of anyone. And this was the hardest thing he ever learned, and the one he was proudest of. The darkness did not leave entirely. Elena had never believed it would, and she had made her peace with that the way she'd made peace with everything about him, clear-eyed, no illusions. There were nights he woke with his hands around her throat before he was awake, and let go the instant his eyes opened, and lay shaking with horror at himself until she pulled his head to her chest and held him. There were times a car came slowly up the cliff road, and she watched all the old stillness flood back into his body, watched him become the boss again in the space of a breath, ready to kill, until the car passed and he exhaled and became her husband again. He kept a gun. She knew where it was. They did not talk about it, but they did not pretend it wasn't there either, because that was their bargain, and always had been. No lies, not even the kind meant to comfort. Once a man came from the old life. He came up the cliff path in an expensive suit, out of place among the fishermen, and Eleanor watched from the terrace as Dante went down to meet him, and she watched them talk for a long time in the shade of an olive tree, and she watched her husband's face and could not read it. When he came back up, he was pale. "What did he want?" she asked. "To offer me back the chair." Dante sat down heavily. "There's been a war since I left. Salvatore held it together for a while, but he's old, and men are dying, and there's a faction that thinks only a Ricci in the chair can bring peace. They want me back. They offered me everything. The whole city." He laughed, a strange sound. "The whole city, Eleanor, for the taking. All I have to do is put the name back on." Eleanor's heart had gone very still. She had always known this day might come. She had always wondered what she would do, whether she would fight for him, or let him go, or leave. She looked at the man she loved and made herself ask the only question that mattered. "What did you tell him?" Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and took a lemon from the bowl on the table, one he had grown himself, and turned it over in the hand that had ordered so much death and now grew fruit above the sea. "I told him," Dante said slowly, "that I'm a farmer named Marino, and I don't know anyone named Ricci, and that if he or anyone like him ever came up this path again and disturbed my wife's afternoon, I would remember, briefly, exactly who I used to be." He set the lemon down, and then I asked him to leave, and he left. He looked up at her,
and his black eyes were clear, and something in them had finally, after a lifetime, come to rest.
I have everything I want, Elena. It's a small white house, and a bad garden, and a woman who told me not to die. There's nothing in that city I would trade a single evening of this for. Nothing. I spent 34 years believing power was the only thing that couldn't be taken from you. He took her hand across the table, open. I was wrong. This is the only thing that can't be taken, because I'd give up everything else to keep it. And a thing you'd give everything to keep is the one thing no one can ever make you lose. Elena came around the table and sat in his lap and put her arms around his neck, and below them the sea turned to gold in the evening light, and the lemon trees moved in the wind, and somewhere in the village the church bell that his anonymous money had helped hang rang the hour. My father used to say, she murmured against his hair, that no one is past saving. I never believed him. I watched too many people bleed to believe him. And then a car crashed into my hospital in the rain, and I saved the most dangerous man in New York, and he turned out to be a man who just needed someone to hold him with open hands. She kissed his temple, his scarred cheek, his mouth. You have hands not stained with blood now, Dante. That's what you called it, that night in the car. You said you wanted to be a man with hands no one feared. Look at them. Dirt under the nails and lemon on the fingers. That's all that's on them now. Dante Ricci looked at his hands, and then at his wife, and then at the sea that went on forever, and the boy who had stood in his father's blood at 12 years old and sworn never to love anything again, finally, 23 years later, let that boy go. The darkness never truly left. It lived in the corners of the house and the corners of his sleep, and it always would. But it no longer ran the house. Love did. And in the end, that was the only power Dante Ricci had ever wanted and never known he could have. The power to lay every other power down and choose, each morning, above the blue and endless water, the woman who had told him not to die because it was inconvenient, and had spent every day since making his life worth the saving. The sun went down over Sicily. The lights came on, one by one, in the little house on the cliff. And two people who had each spent their whole lives standing over the wreckage of violence sat together in the warm dark, hands open, hands clean, and were at last, and against everything the world had promised them, simply and completely home.